City University Television presents the American Theater Wing Seminars. Working in the theater. This seminar, performance.
A warm welcome to the American Theater Wing's Working in the Theater Seminars, now in the 26th year, coming to you from the new Graduate Center of the City University of New York. These seminars offer a wonderful opportunity to explore with the professionals the realities of working in the theater. Today's seminar is devoted to performers. We will learn something about how they became professionals, what their work ethics are, and their reasons for remaining in the theater. We hope that you will enjoy and learn from today's experience. I'm Isabelle Stevenson, Chairman of the Board of the American Theater Wing. And so now, let me introduce our moderators for this seminar. A distinguished member of the theatrical community and President of the Rodgers and Hammerstein Organization and a member of the Board of Directors of the American Theater Wing, Theodore Chapin. Ted, would you now start?
Thank you. Thank you, Isabelle. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce this distinguished and I think terribly serious panel. Starting at my right, Boyd Gaines, a two-time Tony winner for the Heidi Chronicles and She Loves Me. He's currently dancing in Contact at Lincoln Center Theater.
Well, sort of.
Well, you could tell us. He has appeared on television and in films, and recently in the roundabout theater productions of Cabaret and Company. Next, Marin Mazzie, currently the object of Brian Stokes Mitchell's affections as Lily in the new Broadway production of Kiss Me, Kate. She created the roles of Mother in Ragtime and Clara in Stephen Sondheim and James Lapine's Passion. Tom Wopat, currently battling it out with Bernadette Peters in the new Broadway production of Irving Berlin's Annie Get Your Gun. Known to television audiences as Luke in The Dukes of Hazzard, he has never ventured too far from the musical theater, appearing on Broadway in I Love My Wife, City of Angels, and Guys and Dolls. Deborah Yates wears the yellow dress in the current Lincoln Center Theater production of Contact. She has been a Radio City Music Hall Rockette, danced in the Broadway production of Dream, and appeared in the Encore's production of Ziegfeld Follies of 1936. Bryan Batt doesn't seem to be able to leave the Minskoff Theater, where he is playing his fourth consecutive role, this time as Monty the DJ in Saturday Night Fever. He originated the role of Darius in Paul Rudnick's Jeffrey and has skewered the best as a member of the cast of various versions of Forbidden Broadway. Kristin Chenoweth, a Tony winner for her remarkably accurate portrayal of a 4-year-old in You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown, is currently starring in epic proportions. Her credits range from the color tour role of Cunegonde in Candide to her ferocious nurse in Bill Finn's A New Brain. Welcome, and thank you for being here. I want to address the first question to Marin because she started previews 3 days ago, had a 2-show day yesterday, and I am very impressed, and I thank you for being here.
Look at the bags under my eyes.
My spies tell me things are going pretty well, but I want to know, how is it going?
It's going really well. We're having so much fun. It's such a fun show, and the whole rehearsal process has just been, I mean, a joy, one of the most joyous things that I've ever been involved with, and I think it has to do with the fact that the show is really fun, the first revival in 50 years, which we're all really excited about, and Michael Blakemore, an amazing director, sort of heading the whole company, and just sort of setting the tone of fun and a great working atmosphere of exploration. And Brian Stokes and I are having a great time together, too. And the whole company's great.
Have the audiences taught you given you any surprises?
I think what is wonderful is that because the book is, we're doing basically the original book, which was written in 48, 47. And the jokes, the kind of silly, fun jokes, they're loving. They're really, and I think we weren't sure that was, we thought there were going to be snickers. People are howling, so that's great. And the music, of course, is, all the numbers are just getting huge response. So it's really fun.
That's great. Well, has there been adaptation done for the book? Or
A little bit.
Okay.
A little bit in the second act. Just a little.
Okay. Brian, you just opened the show. They
Yes,
previewed
we
for a
just
while.
Previewed for almost a month, yes.
What did the preview audiences teach you?
Mug. Yeah. It's true. They basically taught me trust your work, and the audiences, especially for this show, they love the show, they love the music, and believe it or not, they jump to their feet at the end of every performance and dance in the aisles, which is a first. I've never seen that happen at the Minskoff Theater before. But the preview audiences are pretty much the same as the regular after opening night audiences. But I had no idea that they were going to laugh at me as much as they do. Not with me. But it's really a fun show, and the audience have a great time, but they're no different than the regular, after opening audiences.
Well,
they teach you when to hold for a laugh.
Right.
And in previews you can go for push the envelope a little more when the director's not there.
That was yesterday's seminar.
Oh, really? But definitely they teach you, what to do, where to pause, where to, you have to feel what they're giving you, because they're the most important character in the play. Okay.
And Kristin, in Epic Proportions, you cut out the intermission in previews, yes?
Yeah, we learned that our show is only 85 minutes long now without the intermission, and we learned that once you take an intermission in such a broad comedy as Epic Proportions, it's really work to get them back. You take a break and then you come back where you left off, and we just didn't need it, so we cut it out, and it ended up really, I think it makes for a better evening. I mean, you're in and out in 85 minutes, you've had a great, fun time, and we just learned that we didn't need it, so we took it out. That made me for a 12-second costume change, so that was probably the hardest thing about it for me.
Oh, but actors can do anything.
Yeah, and dressers.
I think I was probably part of what I can say charitably was probably the worst preview audience of Contact, since I was there with Thunder's Night.
Oh, always fun.
Prejudged.
But they were pretty, except for that night, they were pretty cheerful, weren't they, boys?
You mean preview audiences? Yes, actually, because unlike all the other shows, Contact is in a subscription house. And the subscription audiences tend to be elderly. And that sometimes is can be a cause of well, let's just say some consternation if you're performing on a show that gets a lot of laughs. Often the elderly audiences don't laugh very much. But this show is unusual in as much as it seems to appeal to a fairly wide range of audiences, but the individual response every night is wildly different. I mean, some nights they go crazy, they howl, they laugh at everything. Sometimes they'll laugh at one piece and not another. Sometimes they're very quiet through the whole piece, and then are wildly responsive at the very end. So it's never quite the same. I don't think I've ever done a show that's had as big a difference in response from night to night. The Thunder's nights, yeah, those were by far the dullest crowds I had, but they tend to be. I mean, it tends to be, in institutional theaters, you have patrons who pay lots of money, and I don't know what it is. I don't know if they have an odd expectation or just that they're too rich to laugh. Yeah.
But
maybe that's the problem.
It must be unnerving to a performer, at least in the beginning, to think, am I suddenly doing it all wrong?
It can be. Those nights aren't so bad because Bernie Gersten graciously warned us that, and he said that they tend to be quiet, and so we were expecting it. And I think by the time we got to most of them, we'd been doing the show for a few weeks, so we'd already experienced the ups and downs of different audiences. And then also, it's an esoteric piece. It isn't, it doesn't, it's not designed for big applause, at least, and especially the piece that Deb and I do, the last one, Contact, isn't designed for big yucks or for a big applause at the end of numbers. The numbers tend to meld one into the next. So I think by the time we got to those, we were fairly well prepared and were able to just keep playing through. That it can be, though, I think, especially if you've had a really raucous crowd the night before, or if you've made like big breakthroughs, the next day you tend to have a bit of a...
Has there been any difference in the audiences ever since the reviews sort of told the people what it is?
Told them it was a hit.
Right, among other things.
Well, there's some truth to that, actually. I do think people, they come with high expectations, which actually can work against you sometimes. Sometimes people have built up in their mind what they think they're going to see, and then the show might be different than what they've built up in their heads. But I think this show, people do come expecting to laugh and to be moved, and hopefully they are. I mean, I think certainly we're very privileged to be a part of this show because I think it is a very special experience. And I do think since the reviews have come out, the audiences have been more vocal. Maybe that's the difference between a preview audience and a audience who you have once you're open, but they are more vocal now. They're more likely to laugh loudly, and they're more likely to applaud, because we don't have applause moments built into the show, as Boyd was saying. You know, there aren't any moments where you're supposed to laugh here and you're supposed to applaud here, and the audience sort of feels obligated to do that. It's not built into the show. So it can surprise you, actually. I mean, I definitely have had moments when the audience laughs at something that you're not expecting them to laugh at, or applauds at a moment when we weren't expecting that. In fact, sometimes we do have to hold dialogue, or you're used to the momentum going along at a certain pace, and all of a sudden you're like, wow, there's people out there, you know. But the magic of our show is that I think we get so caught up in the experience of being in contact, at least in the club itself. There's a certain energy that comes about, and you don't forget about the audience, because there's definitely a give and take between the audience and the performers. But I think we get so wrapped up in the experience of the show itself that regardless of whether they're vocal and applauding or laughing, the experience for me and with Boyd and with the other members is just as rich every night, whether the audience is enthusiastic or very quiet. And I think we give the same performance regardless of the audience response.
Well, your audience is right on top of you, aren't they?
Yeah.
Very on top of us.
I mean, you can't miss them.
Literally.
Whereas, as opposed to a proscenium stage where, you know, pretty much you're blinded by the light out front.
Yeah.
Do you have that experience? I mean, do you
We have a couple of occasions in our show where we have the shooting matches between Bernadette and I. And those, it's lit so hot on stage, I can see about halfway back.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
But most of the time, you can't see out there very much at all.
I'm so guilty. I hate to say this, but I can see the audience totally. See their faces.
I like to look at the audience.
I do too, and it's great when they're having a great time. And sometimes when you look at them and
That's when it's
Do you
not
have
good.
direct?
Well, you get somebody sleeping in the front row.
Yeah.
That happens.
That's concern.
My character talks to the audience. I mean,
That's
I totally
great. That's fun.
interact, and I'm always like, okay, you need to wake up. Get your feet off the stage. I mean, I can do that. I can do that. But it is disheartening to look out and see someone maybe sleeping or you know,
smacking their gum.
Smacking their gum.
or
Or the
whatever.
big nun, right when they walk in, taking the gum from the people coming in.
We're given
Candy
a certain
wrappers.
liberty as well, since
Yeah.
in our show, you know, basically it's supposed to be a show within a show.
Right, sure.
So we're supposedly portraying these characters, so you can really relate to the audience, at least in some way. If
You also-
Bernadette doesn't catch me.
You also went out of town with Annie Get Your Gun, something which doesn't happen very much these days.
Well, we tried it out down in Washington, D.C., and they made a few million down there in that big old house. I think that might have been what it was about. We talked first about going to Seattle, and they thought that the expense of going there for the size house it was really didn't make sense. And we had a lot of tightening up to do in D.C., and we cut about 15 minutes off the show.
Were you in the Opera House or in the?
Yeah,
Eisenhower?
Opera House, 3,000 seats.
Wow.
Yo!
Big.
Yeah, really.
That's big.
But it was fun. It's been a blast from the beginning. It's been a lot of fun.
Since you're talking about audience, what do you bring, and where does it come from on how to react to the different audiences that you're getting? Because that's constant. It isn't only a preview or a ticket buying. It's an audience, and that makes the difference between being a professional and either overcoming or bringing them forth. Where does that come from?
You're talking about technique?
The technique or experience? How did you get that? How do you know when to tighten up or to let go or to pull?
I think instinct or the audience, like Bryan said, the audience is really part of the show. So it's all about listening. I mean, you have to be listening to your fellow actors. I mean, I think that's one of the most important things, is to really listen on stage as an actor, to really be present and really hear and be, being, whatever. Acting is reacting or being. What is it, one of those acting 101 things?
Or most of them.
Yeah, it's all sort of true in that sense of just truly listening and listening to your audience, because they tell you. That's what we're sort of learning now, because, I mean, we've only done 3 shows, so we're still not really sure where a lot of the laughs are. We're still finding our way, where the scenes, and it is going to vary night to night, certainly. It always does. But, certain things that you can hopefully depend on, oh, this is going to land, or that this will probably get a laugh, or that sort of thing. But I think that just comes from...
I think that's the important thing, is listening to audience as well as to your
That's how
actor.
actors, and it's so true. You get as good as you give on stage. I do believe,
Yes.
there are some people that it's about them, and it's when they're performing, and it's really not. It's about the entire cast and the audience together having this unique experience. It's not just one person. It's the entire company.
I think
scene.
if a show really works, it'll work with a bunch of different audiences.
Yes.
Definitely.
And that, if your scene really carries, you can keep it pretty tight without any reaction from the audience, and it will land. The point of the scene will land. If they're going to respond to every little thing that you have, that's great, and give them a little opening there. But I think that a show that is well constructed will withstand about any audience.
Definitely.
Do you ever have the tendency, though, in one performance where something isn't quite going the way it used to go, where you'd want to do a little more or overcompensate, or you try to...
I go faster.
That's
fast as I
Basically,
can.
the rule of thumb is that
funnier.
if you're not getting the reactions, it's like there's nothing to wait for.
No, there they go.
Drive that thrust.
Just go.
Don't wait.
No, don't wait.
Exactly.
Faster, louder, funnier.
Yes.
Those are also, as a non-actor, those are the moments where I think, oh, my heart goes out to all of you. I have to say.
You wish we'd go faster, too.
Hurry up.
Mostly for the
Get this
non-actor.
over.
I think what Tom is saying is exactly right. That if the work has been done well, with the exception of, I suppose, of maybe some kind of burlesque where you have obvious setups for laughs that demand, a joke that demands a laugh. Right. Basically, if it's done well and played honestly, whether something gets a laugh or not, the moment still plays, and
Yes.
you just keep going. It's
Yeah.
just, you don't there's nothing to wait for, you just play.
Because audiences do vary, and
They're
as
all
far as what Boyd's saying, elderly audience. I mean, sometimes your matinee. Like yesterday, we had a matinee audience. I mean, typical, more elderly people. They loved it. They loved it. But they're listening.
Right.
You know, they're listening.
They enjoy
They're
it, but they're not
enjoying
as
it,
vocal.
but they're not.
right.
Blah. They're
And
not.
the corporate audience.
That's what makes it more fun than doing
Yes.
a sitcom.
Buyout.
Absolutely.
The sitcoms, oh, geez. You listen, and it's mostly the producers and the writers that are laughing at every joke.
That is the oddest laughter in the world. Isn't
Very
it?
forced.
Very forced.
And then they can always add it later. If they
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
there you
I'm
go.
a fan of the elderly audience. I will say, I can't believe it, but at our show, they're loving it. It's our corporate audience, the buyout.
When did the movie come out?
77?
77.
Well, the defense rests.
There you go.
I think the older audiences are a little more experienced at theater going.
Yeah,
Sure.
that's
You
true.
know,
That's
Yeah.
it's
absolutely
more,
true.
they come ready to be gratified.
Yes.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And I
Yeah.
think they really open themselves up to it more than our generation or the younger generation who's, they're used to video games and all this input all the time,
Immediate.
MTV stuff. And theater isn't quite as relevant to a lot of people as
It's
it
a lot
was.
more work.
Yeah. And it's always
Concentrate for a longer time.
it's always
Yeah.
great to see younger people in the theater and,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
see them enjoy a show. But the older audiences, they're a little more open to it, I think.
Yeah, they were
I think
raised.
the interesting thing is that you're dancing and you're known as an actor.
Well, you've seen me.
I did, and I still won't answer that question. How does it differ for you? And you are a dancer, and you're now acting. Tell me about that. How did that come about, and how much training did you have to bring to each part of this, to the different things that you're doing now? I've watched you lo these many years.
Well, I think we were very fortunate working with Susan Stroman, who is director and choreographer of this piece. And certainly she tailored both these pieces, these roles to us. They were created on us, and so they really use our strengths to the best advantage. And of course, a lot of rehearsal for both of us. My background is primarily dance. I've been dancing since I was 5 years old. I grew up in Texas, and I studied in Texas, and I studied in London, and I studied in Chicago, and here in New York. And but I think the thing that's very interesting about Contact, and that Susan brought to this piece, is that there really is no separation between the dancing and the acting. It's not like some musical numbers where you go and you do a tap dance and then you do a scene, and then you do a little ballet over here and then you do a scene. There's not dancing and acting. You're actually, both are two completely married at every moment. And so every movement has a reason. And so when you're dancing, actually what you're doing is acting with your body. And in the same sense, when you're doing a scene, it's, in a sense, you're dancing with your words. And so I think Boyd and I actually really were able to use each other in that sense, because I learned from his experience acting, and he hopefully could draw on my experience as a dancer. And it's partner dancing, you know, that this is not, you know, disco dancing. There's a very big difference in the two. And
No, it's
but there is.
People are not.
And very well.
I don't. I just
But in partner dancing, there is a big difference, because you have to learn how to really sense each other's energy and movement and respond to very subtle cues from one another. And I think actually that's a big advantage. It's sort of what Marin was saying, that it's the same thing as really listening. You're listening with your body. And it's the same thing that you do as an actor. You truly tune into your partner and pay attention to what's going on.
Did that come about through rehearsals?
And I wanted to talk about Contact, because Boyd mentions this, it's at an institutional theater, which has a built-in audience, but it also, I believe that this show was an idea, and that Andre just said to Susan Stroman, do you have any idea, do you want to do it? When did you get involved, both of you? How did you get involved, and at what stage? Did Susan call and say, I want you to dance, Boyd?
I got a call from my agent who said they're doing Susan Stroman and John Weidman are doing this workshop at Lincoln Center. This was either late November or early December. And said, it's a dance workshop. Do you want to be in it? And I went, well, why are they calling me? Surely there's some mistake. And they said, no. So they sent me over, it was essentially maybe about 15, 16-page outline describing the show, which ironically is pretty much what we're doing. I mean, very little has changed. It had all the numbers, all the music rather, in it, and a description of the story, and some dialogue.
Was it John's idea?
It was both of them. I think Susan got the idea. I mean, the sort of apocryphal story now is that she went to a dance club down in the Meat District, swing, some pool hall that becomes a swing club at night. Saw all these people dancing, and saw this woman in a yellow dress who was quite evocative, and said,
That's
"What?"
you.
That's exactly right. And said, "Wow, this people were coming up and asking her to dance, and she was saying no, and she was sort of, she was kind of the focal point of this of the evening at the club, and that sort of inspired this idea about how dancing with someone could change their lives, and then I guess when Andre and Bernie invited them to come do something, she and John had collaborated before. That was what they decided that they would work on, and I'm not sure how long I don't know when that happened, but by the time they wrote that John actually wrote out the outline, and then decided to do it, and then I called. Susan was in London filming Oklahoma, the Trevor Nunn production, and so I said, well, I think maybe I need to talk to her, because I think I'd met her socially, but I'd never worked with her, and I really thought she thought I was someone else. Because the description of the character does have to dance at some point, and I thought, well, I'm just not a dance. I'm a dance challenged, I think. So we finally did hook up, and I talked, and she said, no, and I really want an actor for the part and not a dancer. And I said, well, I'll try anything, but I really am limited in what I can do. And she said, don't worry, I'm used to working with
Anybody.
The dance challenge.
Did your
Lord of the
agent think
dance.
that you should do this?
Oh yeah, she loved it, and it was. I mean, it was a. It was. I mean, I've said this before, but I think it's really. I mean, you can imagine if Joe Torre called you and said, "You like baseball?" Well, yeah. Did you play baseball? Well, no, not really, but. Okay, but would you like to come work out with the Yankees? You'd say, yeah.
And I have to say that because I worked with Susan on Oklahoma, she invited me. That call came to the office. Come this thing called Contact. I thought I have no idea what this even means. And down into the bowels of Lincoln Center, into a rehearsal room, where I was sitting in the front row, and this thing, it was just the third piece that you're both in.
Right.
And I was absolutely overwhelmed by it. I had absolutely no idea what it was. You came on in a yellow dress, and I thought, this is one of the sexiest things I've seen. And then, when you're in the front row in a rehearsal room, as in the theater, your legs are going over your...
Yeah.
But in a way, I thought to myself, this is something that can be created by a place like Lincoln Center and nowhere else, because it really, nobody was saying, now we got, it's got to be a theater party on this day.
Right.
Which I think is that's a really important thing.
Well, it's been through those
Thanks.
backers performances
Well,
a week
exactly.
into rehearsal.
Right.
It's been really unusual in that it's the least interfered with show I think I've ever been in.
That's nice.
We went.
It's got to be nice.
We went into these rehearsals. I remember Andre and Bernie came and said hello the first day. And then we didn't see them for weeks. They'd just come in and sort of go like, "Oh,
We just
that looks
worked.
very interesting."
The kids were playing.
And they
That's
would
right.
disappear,
That's
and they
exactly what it was
finally-
like.
They did not come, and they did
Exactly.
not watch run-throughs. They did not watch it. They came actually right at the end when we were doing it, and then they loved it. And then the most amazing thing is that they had the guts to then say, "We want to do it." I mean, people would say, "What are you doing?" I'm going, "I'm doing this really weird dance thing down in the basement at Lincoln Center, but we're having a ball." But
It's also interesting, and this is not what we're here to talk about, but I think it's the best use of canned music I've ever seen. And
Yeah.
now that it has become a hit, and now that it was going to move upstairs, suddenly there's a question about, do you want a whatever this is, call it a musical, call it whatever, with canned music? And it's
It's
not done. It's part
it's
of
a soundtrack to. I mean,
It's part of the concept,
It's really part of the
actually.
concept.
Yeah.
Was always that it was. I mean, in fact, in Contact, in my character's apartment, it's always been this way. The music that you hear are all those CDs are on
stage.
my desk.
Yeah.
So it's always been that this is music that's in his mind. And I mean, it's funny. Yeah, we've heard a little flack about people saying, "Well, they should be using a live orchestra," and stuff like that. But
Can't be.
but
It's not part of the concept.
but
yeah.
it was never part of the concept, and it also too is like no one ever bitches about movie soundtracks. I mean, it's essentially the same kind of thing.
Well, yeah,
Well,
it's also
we
a
talk
play.
about live
Not saying
theater.
it's
there.
not.
No.
That's part of it, and that's why. But it works in this.
It was part of the
works very
concept
well.
from the very
Exactly.
beginning.
Yeah, it was
But
all part of
that's
the
the
concept.
reason
Plays
why
and
they're
I mean,
so
and Susan
different.
and
You
John
couldn't
do-
recreate that stuff.
No. But it's also, there is I mean, for example, if you had a moment in a play where you had, say, a recording of Martin Luther King's speech, that's a very specific cultural reference. And to have an actor do it live, while that could be just as effective in a certain way, is not the same choice. I mean, it's just not it's not the director's
It
choice.
wouldn't be the same to have an orchestra play Simply Irresistible. You've got to hear Robert Palmer's
Right.
voice.
Right.
Part of it is
That's what you
hearing
go-
That-
recognizable music,
Right.
recognizable
Your
voices.
brain is going.
What you bring to whatever happened with you when
Right.
you first heard that
That's right.
song, or
Right.
the emotions,
That's
or
right.
whatever came with it too.
Yeah,
you
that's absolutely
bring
right.
to the piece too, as an audience member, I guess.
And the idea is that this is all happening in Boyd's head. It's a fantasy. I mean, the whole evening is about fantasy. And so these are songs, he imagines going to a swing club and probably doesn't quite know what that means and what swing music is all about. And so he picks songs from his life. And in this fantasy, he picks songs from his life that were meaningful. And I do think that's why these songs are important, because they, like he said, they're the cultural events. They're the songs with those artists performing them. And eventually he gets around to sing, 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 thank goodness. But meanwhile, we go through Beyond the Sea and Robert Palmer. And I think that's what makes it unique.
Yeah.
But also, those characters, as you said earlier, they were molded around you and pulled from you. That must be satisfying from an actor's standpoint.
What do you have, Brian? What kind of orchestration do you have? In the
Oh, we have a full
center?
orchestra,
How
although
many?
they're not in the pit. They're piped in. They're in another room. There's, unfortunately, this is the sound they wanted. But at least for me as an actor, on stage we hear no live percussive or acoustic sound. It's all piped in, and they wanted it to sound like you were in a disco.
Do you have trouble hearing, like when you're singing? Like, are there monitors?
Yes. one rehearsal, they weren't getting, it was a rehearsal, and we have to come on with just a percussive beat, Paige and I, and it wasn't coming through. There was nothing piped in. We could not hear a beat. Could not hear 1, 2, 3, 4.
Wow.
And it was just a rehearsal, thank God everything
Right.
got fixed.
Sure.
But it's the concept of the sound, that they wanted it to sound like you were in a disco, so that everything was loud and piped in. All the instruments are off stage except for the synthesizers, the bass guitar, the guitars are in the pit.
Do you have a conductor?
Oh yeah,
you
we
have a
watch them, and
conductor.
every show I've been in at Minskoff and other theaters too, now we have the monitors, the TV monitors. Do you have those?
No, we don't have because the back is such an intimate theater,
That's
and
true.
Paul
You
is
don't
right.
need it, right.
You don't need it.
And the
It's-
orchestra's in the
big.
pit.
The
Yeah,
you
orchestra,
can
and,
see 'em, yeah,
and
you
that's
can
a
see them, yeah.
fabulous pit at the back.
Yeah.
It's got, I mean, when we did our Zitz probe last Friday, it was so exciting because we did it acoustically, the band and us.
Oh, nice.
And as other people were singing, I walked up in the balcony.
Sure.
You could hear perfectly. You could hear every word, everything. And Michael Blakemore said, it would be revolutionary if we said, no mics.
No mics.
No mics. And I said,
Why don't
yeah,
Never
I mean, we were
happened.
tempted to do
Never
it.
happened.
But because the
Oh,
audiences
wouldn't
had
that be
become so
wonderful?
used
It
to
never
it.
happened.
It's
The audience
so
would sit there and go,
sad.
what? Or they would feel like they were being
Stagehands
gypped
Union
or
wouldn't
something.
let you do it.
I don't
think
know.
also because
When did they start the mic in the mouth? That-
60s, wasn't it?
We didn't have that, but
Oh,
No, not talking
well,
about
they used floor mics. I mean,
Oh.
back
Yeah,
in the
30s, actually,
they
as
did.
early as the 30s,
Yeah.
they used it
They-
very,
they had-
very preliminarily.
Yes, little enhancement, but
but not the body mic.
no
I don't
body
mind
mics.
the little body mic where it's disguised.
No, I can't stand
We have
this.
these things.
Oh, the big guy.
Which, I hope I don't catch any flack from this from the producers, but I found it, besides not fitting your head, when you have a big wig on like I do, I have this big, bad perm. It's great. I love it.
It's bad perm.
It's hideous.
That's redundant.
I want Gino Pinelli, Tony Orlando gone wrong. That's what I asked for. It's just hideous perm. It's great. But once they put it on, and if the mic's not in the right place, forget. I mean, the sound guy's yanking and pulling, and otherwise, other shows, they just stick them, tape them, and you're fine.
It does look like orthodontia.
You
But I
not-
think it's
It's so
impeding
odd.
for acting. I
But
think
is it-
like,
It's also
you can't
so
get
odd when
that.
they use it. I have to say, like in Civil War, in a period show.
Yes.
And
You
then
know,
you see
I
the,
went and saw this with these mics, these women in these, big, beautiful dresses
I
and
feel
these
it's so
microphones.
wrong.
It looks
Because
alien.
It's just
Ground
not
control
right.
Major
David
Tom.
Letterman. I was
Not
watching David
right.
Do you
Letterman.
not have, do you as actors, performers, not have any say in the kind
None.
of mic you want to
Absolutely
use?
not.
No.
I kind of put my foot down once in a while. The sound guys kept wanting me to stick it out,
Oh, I
more,
won't put
out
mine
into my
out.
face to where you could see it, and I won't do it.
I won't either.
So you just turn it
think
up.
you're
I'll
so
sing,
right.
I'll sing
Yeah.
I
plenty
will
loud.
not. I
You
will
can-
not wear my.
You can turn the damn
Yeah.
thing off if you want.
Yes.
I will not have my mic seen. That is one thing about I know people will. Even the little ones that we wear, the body
Right.
mics.
I mean, to
people
me,
wear them
to me,
down
that would
here,
be a
people
deal
wear
breaker
them
for
here.
me.
I
If
can't.
they
Sunset,
wanted,
they had
if
them
they
right
wanted
here.
me to wear one of those rigs, I wouldn't do the show.
It's ridiculous.
But
They-
I
they have-
feel
in
strong.
What would
Sunset Boulevard,
happen
they had
if
them
you
right
said
here on our
absolutely
foreheads.
not?
Well, then they'd have to
They
deal
have
with
to
that
rethink.
somehow.
They have to rethink their.
And you were saying no.
I
Could
just
all
think
of
it's
you-
important.
Could all of you be heard without these mics?
It
Depends on how the...
Depends on the house.
Technology
over an
to be
amplified
Yes.
orchestra.
No,
You can't
not.
sing.
The
You
orchestra
couldn't- There's
couldn't
no
be.
way
No
you
way.
could sing over.
No, you couldn't.
You couldn't hear over the amplification, but the other night I was watching Letterman, and I don't know what it's going to come to, but Leanne Rimes was on, and she had one of those mics, but this one was like this coffee cup on in front of her face. And I was like, you can't, you're just totally cut off. Did you see it?
No.
She's a cute, wonderful, beautiful, great.
She's awesome singer.
In front of
She's 17.
She's 17. Now she should say no, but when you have an amplified
Hey,
orchestra,
she probably chose it.
I know.
Well, they probably
But
say
it's
that's
too
the best sound. We'll get you the best sound.
Exactly.
Right.
But-
And I thought
is
when
the-
you don't, I'm sorry,
No.
delineate from the sound, from the acting. I always say, give me the actor.
Yeah.
Communicate with the audience, and I find some of those things inhibiting.
Well, the most disconcerting about as being an audience member, for me, watching a show that's especially heavily amplified, is that, well, first of all, if it's not done really, really well, it's often hard to tell who the hell's talking or
Yes.
singing. You,
Yes.
Especially in a big choral number, someone has a
Yes.
solo, and you
Right.
go, rather than in an acoustic situation where you simply go, oh, that person's
Right.
singing. But this, you go,
Because the
Whose
sound's
lips
coming
are
from all
moving?
over.
Yeah,
That's-
it's all around you.
It's all around you. It's very disconcerting, and I mean, the basic idea of theater, live theater, is that we're all in the same room and we can see each other and we can hear each other.
Right.
Right.
And therefore, there is no distance between us. But and I think the trend of heavy amplification. I mean, the idea before, as we were talking about, enhancement.
Right.
That makes it a little more,
Right.
a little easier for.
And they're talking about that at Carnegie Hall and everything.
Yeah, yeah.
They're
A
talking
lot of
enhanced
opera houses
Yeah.
are having it.
Opera.
Yes.
Opera.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, I-
Opera.
But I think it's a.
But yeah, if the
I think it's the sound guys. I think they got a whole little cabal going on.
It's also a rock show.
I think it is. I
when you
think
do-
it's that. I think
when,
it's cultural
You know,
that we've
Cole
got a
Porter
coming-
show. You know, it should be.
Right.
You know, very minimal and acoustic. Our show, it's a big rock disco.
Right.
Crank it
And
up.
that's
and
right.
that's
Yeah.
But
the
there
joint
is an
there.
argument that in the Ethel Merman days, she sort of, you know, what you got out for volume, you missed in nuance.
Nuance.
Right.
That's true.
It does. I mean,
It's a different style of singing now, wouldn't you say?
Yes.
Yes,
Well, yeah,
you
well, it can be a lot more
You can
intimate.
be more intimate. You can be. That is one thing that is, I have to say, is nice because you can afford, if you want to take some quiet moments, you can, which you probably really couldn't then. But
not.
But I think that also
No, I
that
think
sometimes encourages people to discard technique.
Mm-hmm.
And
It does promote it, and then
Yes.
you.
and then you hear a lot of singers out there
They can't.
They can't
that
do it 8
really
times a week.
don't know
No.
what they're doing.
they don't. Yeah,
But
because
they're
they
loud enough that
depend.
you can hear 'em.
Because they
Just turn
depend
it
on that
It
microphone.
does
Yeah.
promote it. You know, technique is real important, I think, and a lot of the. I hate to say new kids because I'm, but you know, I myself have a master's degree in opera, and I learned how to not only sing that way with technique, but speak that way with technique. And since I'm in a play right now with no mics, I've realized how important support, no matter whether you're speaking or singing, how important that support is. And I sang at Carnegie Hall last year without a mic. And if you truly have the technique, and of course there's the balance issue too of the orchestra,
Right. So
you should be able to project it.
Right.
You should be able to do it.
Yeah.
And you should be able to do it 8 times a week. Yes, you'll get tired, and yes, you'll have to take care of yourself. But I do think the microphones promote a little bit of laziness. I do.
Definitely. And also, I mean, people are getting away with having no technique. People aren't
Exactly.
studying
Right.
because it's sort of like they don't
don't have to.
need to, in a
Right.
sense.
Right.
They don't have to project, which is disconcerting. I think.
Pop
Wouldn't your
singers.
directors be interested in hearing what you all say?
Oh,
As you
The
all
directors
agree
have the
with
same
it.
concern.
yes.
Yeah.
Do they?
I'm sure they do.
Yeah.
Because this is the first time that it's been so unanimous, and I mean, we've had so many people in musicals here. And I find it very disconcerting, and I find it that I keep going back to live theater, because that's what the theater is, and that's what makes it different from your sitcoms and
Right.
everything else. That there shouldn't be anything between the audience and you. You should communicate. Why isn't this being very, very strongly, this message given to the people that have the power to say
I
yay
think
or
there's
nay?
two big reasons. First is the advent of synthesized instruments have to be amplified. They're naturally louder, and they're easier for the audience to hear. They have more sort of visceral impact. If you hear, I mean, I'm sure when you're doing your Zitz probe, as rich and luscious as the sound of maybe 28 pieces is in a pit, compared to, say, an opera orchestra of 60 or a philharmonic of 110,
Right.
it's not an overwhelming sound. It's actually fairly subtle if you're sitting in the back of the house. And the audience has to pay attention. They have to be quiet, and they have to concentrate. And if you were used to going to see Terminator 2 and or listening to big Dolby home theater system.
Or in your
go to
car.
Or in
the
your car,
car,
exactly
right.
like that, which is a cultural phenomenon that's not going away.
No.
True.
And I think that
Surround sound.
it's simply to go into some place and have to pay attention, concentrate, is something that we're not accustomed to doing. So I think that's the first part of it. And the other is just that economically, it's a lot cheaper to have a 10-piece band with a lot of synthesizers
Yeah.
and amplified orchestras and
don't have a-
one sound or two sound people, rather than pay 28 people
Right.
to play.
We don't have. We have, I think, 17. We have. We have.
That's a-
synth-
Your synths,
If you're
right?
going to have
Yeah.
a
We have
2,000-seat house like the Gershwin, too, you're going
That's right.
to have opera singers. You're going to have amplification.
It's about. That's about cost.
That's
I mean,
good.
that's
Well,
now
that's
about.
absolutely
That's
true.
about cost. It's cheaper for your producer to have a synthesizer down there than 10 more players.
Violins.
Also, if you rely on amplification, you can put the orchestra as it is on Annie Get Your Gun, which is split and upstaged
Right.
left and right. You couldn't
Right.
do. I mean, if you
Because
did
you
that
got the
acoustically,
pitch.
you couldn't hear it anywhere in
That's
this
right.
room.
But I see both sides of that. I do see the progression, although because the music, there are different kinds of music now in
Right.
the last.
It would,
how many,
it would be
25 years?
ludicrous in your piece
Yes.
to do it
To have
acoustically.
it
It would be
right.
ludicrous.
Yeah,
It would be
it's one
nonsensical.
violin, whether you're a mother or whether you're a
Yeah,
brother,
exactly.
staying alive. But on the flip side, I agree totally, but I don't think that'll ever change. That as long as
won't.
someone in a dark room, you turn on a light and someone starts to talk and tell a story, you know, there will always be the intimate theater. There will always
Right.
be a desire for it. There will always be an audience for it. But I think now, like you said, everyone is so overstimulated.
Well, there's also,
And the
you know,
computer
there's a
in
certain
your face.
homogenization, I think, of the Broadway theater, in that I think producers are less inclined to really take a piece and say, this would be good if we could do this as acoustically as possible. I think there's like a machinery that's, you know, in the production sense,
I
that's
think
kind
you're
of in place. You know, you walk in, you're going to have costumes, you're going to have sound, you're going to have all your stage guys that you have to have, and it's got to be dancing in your Broadway shows. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Is that there's a certain machinery that's in place, and the shows are kind of sometimes scooched into to fit the machinery rather
Right.
than the other way around, which would be
Very
nice.
true.
Yeah.
But would Contact be put up if it wasn't for Lincoln Center?
Well, that's exactly
Would
right.
that have happened
That's exactly
commercially?
right. It's, I mean, as Ted was saying, it's just there isn't, if someone, if John and Susan had gone to commercial producers and said, we have this great idea for a show. It's 3 pieces, there's almost no dialogue, it's mostly dancing and a bunch of canned music, they would have said.
Oh, can you get Rick and Morty?
Forget it.
Yeah, right. And of course, even if they had chosen to produce it, it wouldn't be what we're doing. It's just simply all the
Right.
commercial, as you say, the sort of the way things are done now would have dictated, like, well, you can't do that. You have to do it this way.
Right.
You can't do it that way. You have to do it this way. That's the way it's done now.
Apart, you mentioned earlier about sitcom and theater. What's your training? Where did you come?
Oh, I
Which
came from
first?
theater.
You came from theater.
Yeah.
Where did into
I did television. Actually, after I was on Broadway and I Loved My Wife back in '78, and then I got drafted into television.
It's nothing good show.
But it's paid a lot of bills and opened a lot of doors. It's
And
but the
everybody
theater
gets
is
that.
always the thing that I enjoy the most, and I keep coming back to it, and it's
We
very
enjoy
gratifying.
to-
It's a blast.
Brian, what about you?
Oh, I would love to be on television. I find no
You are now,
shame in it
as
at
a
all. No, no. I love it.
What's your
mainly
background?
Just
Where did
theater. I've
Where
done
did you
one
study?
film. I went to Tulane University in New Orleans, where I'm from. I wanted to go other places. My father was very ill at the time, so I stayed home. And I studied up here. I immediately out of college ran up here and studied. But mainly theater and one movie. So.
Did you develop the character?
Yeah.
More so with the
they
funny
were
hat.
Great. Leon and Susie Benzinger, who did the costumes, she just had a field day with me. I said, when we first met, we just clicked, and I just said, go to town, knock yourself out. The higher the platforms, the better, you know, which I regret now because my knees are 1 month and my knees are almost shot.
Yeah.
They're like 4-inch heels and 2-inch platforms, every shoe I wear, and I have to dance in them. I didn't think of that. But yes, I did tell Leon about the wigs. I said, you know, big, huge perm, Juno Vanelli gone wrong. Make it, you know, he's this, you know, lecherous character. So I said, let's have fun.
It's bigger than life. It
Oh,
really is.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But and the jewelry, when I really knew who the character was, is Susie had this whole big table of fake jewelry, because I said I have to have rings on every finger, and chains and medallions, and I saw this huge scorpion, and I went, that's it. That's that. So my whole character is defined by fake gold scorpion.
I went to Oklahoma. I grew up in Oklahoma, and by Texas.
Right.
We are neighbors. And I got my undergraduate degree in music theater, and got my master's degree in opera performance, and thought I was going to be an opera singer. I won the Met auditions, and decided to do music theater. I auditioned for a play after I graduated, and out at Paper Mill Playhouse, and got one of the parts, and then I had to decide, what are you really going to do with your life, and what do you really want to do with your life? So I decided to move to New York and stay here and do this.
What was your first Broadway show?
My first Broadway show was Steel Pier, and then Charlie Brown, and now this.
I'd have to ask you, where did that character come from in You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown?
She's an amalgamation of many people. Probably, I did a lot of watching children, just random children, on the streets, in the subways. My niece is now 5. I studied her a lot, but mainly I read the cartoon strips that Charles Schulz wrote, and one of the things that I noticed in these characters, and in a lot of the children, and certainly my niece, that I noticed, is that they don't know that they're children. They're little adults. And so, the fact that they can't jump rope, or they've got gum on the bottom of their shoe, or they want the ice cream cone now, is very, very important. It's like our banking or our opening night. I mean, it's as important to them as our things are to us, and that's the one thing that I really wanted to bring out in the characters, that they are little adults. And of course, the way Schulz wrote the material, it's very adult-like. So the important thing for me was just not to play it being a child, but just bring out the qualities of being of being very serious and a little adult. But mainly from my niece.
I think you know my niece, too.
What?
At the Tony Awards, I was sitting next to my father quite by accident, and he hadn't seen the show. And just before you started, I turned and I said, "You're about to see a performance that is your granddaughter Tess." And he was on the floor. He was absolutely on the floor. It was a wonderful.
Well,
wonderful.
What's great too about Charlie Brown, that is now carrying over into the play, is that a lot of these kids that sort of enjoyed the show, Charlie Brown, are now coming to Epic Proportions, and I'm happy about that, because I feel like whatever can get them into the theater, into a straight play, even if they mainly love musicals or whatever, it's great. I've had a couple of little girls very upset that they're not seeing Sally. Oh. They've come and, I thought I was coming to see Sally. Well, you signed my poster anyway. But it's been very cute. But I'm glad that they're there, and they're having a theatrical experience. And hopefully learning from it.
Did you audition for the show you're in now, for Eric?
No, I didn't. The director, Jerry Zaks, had come to me while I was doing Charlie Brown and said, "I think this character is so you." And it's funny, because I had never worked with him before, and I don't know what I ever did that made him think that, but I'm glad that he did, because it is a lot of my personality, and I'm lucky that I do get to communicate with the audience, and I do enjoy doing comedy, and it's a wonderful chance to do that. Exactly.
How'd you like Zaks?
I enjoyed him. He's very specific, and he knows what he wants. So he's always very clear with you, and you never have a question. But at the same time, he lets you play, like you said, a wonderful exploration environment. He gives that, and so therefore you're able to bring a lot of your own self to the role, and the writers were on hand, so they sort of wrote it around me and the other people in the show, which is such a gift. And I know Deborah and Boyd and Bryan, when you're creating something, it's a wonderful gift, because if they're smart, they pick up on your ability and your niche and your thing, and they go with that. And And if you're smart as the actor, then you can bring other elements as well to the character. So I've been lucky that I've been able to originate a lot of things, you know. It's
Have
a
there been
great learning
situations where
experience.
that has not existed in working?
Well, a lot of times people think like in a revival that doesn't really exist. But I think in a lot of ways, if a revival is going to be successful, you really do have to create from scratch
Yeah.
the character. You
Yeah.
can't go back and look at what somebody else did with it, because that's a different period. You know, if we did Annie Get Your Gun like they did in Merman's time, it wouldn't be successful, probably. I mean, people would still come because of Bernadette, but I don't think it would have been.
What is the reason for doing a revival then?
Well, in this case, I mean, and I think in her case,
Irving Berlin.
it's the amazing music.
Great music. I think,
Amazing
you know,
music.
why do we keep doing Tosca, and why do we keep it's our
But you're
American.
doing it the same way, though.
We're
when
not
you're
doing- we're not
no,
doing
No, no, I
Kiss
mean,
Me
when you
Kate
say
the
the
same way.
operas are being done pretty much the same way because
Well,
of
they
the music.
mount
Oh,
different
I think they
productions.
mount them
Not so
different.
much.
Yeah.
I've always been
avant-garde
interested
thing.
in that.
But I think it's because we need to keep hearing. I mean, as much as I mean, this is the first revival I've done. I've done original Broadway shows, so this is a different experience. But how wonderful to bring this incredible music and this score to hopefully.
That isn't what I meant. I meant was, why not, if you're doing that, why not do it as it had been done?
Well,
Because it's the classic. It has the music that you want to hear, and it was of a period.
but also, I mean, we don't
Saturday
have.
Night Fever.
I don't
you're-
see how we could. Who remembers exactly what Alfred Drake and Patricia Morrison did in 1948? That could come and remount the production exactly as it was done. I mean, that. Plus, I think that would be dull and
That would be
boring.
it would be a
and
museum piece.
yeah, it
That
would
would
be
be a different.
And they stand
some
the test of
historical
time.
sort of
Conception.
thing.
I think anything that is worth doing, it'll stand the test of time. This
Yeah.
score will live up. The book will live up through different interpretations,
Right.
like that fantastic revival of Carousel and
Right.
King and I. It was
Yeah.
totally reconceived, but yet they worked for today. They had something to say today. Not
Some books hold up better than others.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
Some books
absolutely true.
But I mean,
gotta
every
have some
song on your
adjustments.
show is
But I think-
that.
don't
And-
But I also think what Kristin is saying is true in revival, because if a show was written around certain actors to begin with by good people, by the very nature of what it is, it will be well done, so that when somebody does that part again, it's like it's well constructed.
Yes.
And it's kind of interesting
They're
to think
good
of, you know, you
pieces.
look at Emile de Bec's lines in South Pacific, and if you say them real slow with an Italian accent, they sound, you know,
Revival acts.
but the words, obviously, you know, he just, you know, but it's true.
But I think it's true of any classical play. It's true of any any production worth its salt should be mounted as a new contemporary play. You have to
Yes.
think of it as a new play.
At least for the performer.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
got
You
in your
have to
cons.
be-
It's got
you
to
have
be.
to invent it.
It's got to be fresh.
Just as you would, I think, whoever took over roles back
Right.
then, whoever took over for Merman, whoever took over for whoever, they brought what they were to that piece. Because no one can be those people. No one can be Ethel Merman. No one can be
Tell Forbidden
Enzio
Broadway.
I was
that.
going to say,
Yeah,
you
well,
can't.
Brian is the
I'm
exception.
adding no.
For your heels.
I mean, that's what makes us unique as actors, hopefully, is what we bring ourselves, we bring what we have to a role.
Are you given any directive on that? Anything of this is the way it was done, but we don't want you to do
No.
it that way?
No.
This is it. And,
This is
and you
complete. I
bring-
mean, well, at least with Kiss Me Kate, we've been looking at it as a completely. It's our piece. We are inventing. It's a completely reinvented show for, and not looking at any. And the people who the Eliases who had the Spiewak book were holding on to it, as you know, forever and ever and ever and ever, and weren't letting anyone do it. They came to the preview Monday night and said to Brian Stokes and myself that Patricia and Alfred are nowhere, and how thrilled they were about that. And I think for them that because they have been so protective of the piece, and so for them to really look at it and to be able to see it in a completely other way is wonderful, and that's why we do it, I think.
Well, in our case too, in Annie Get Your Gun, the portrayal of Frank was always, he was always kind of a stiff, arrogant, well, okay. That got away from me. But in our case, what we wanted to try to do, with Ethel, it was always such a star vehicle, and when they recreated it in '66, they actually got rid of the ingenue couple and gave her another song. And so she was singing everything but Defenses Are Down. And in our case, I think Bernadette and Graciela and Peter Stone, they all wanted to have a little better balance. So they gave us latitude, and they, my character's a little more sympathetic and a little less abrasive to her. You know, it's a little less of a cat fight anymore. And it's a lot more fun to do this way, for one thing. And the people, like Berlin's daughters, have all said that they like this character much better. So. Thanks.
Yeah. I'll pass it on.
Came to me. No, I'm kidding.
So how many people came to see Forbidden Broadway that you were making fun of? In that case?
Too many. That was the most nerve-wracking. Not when, well, that and when you know big directors and big producers were in the audience, but the most nerve-wracking is when you had to imitate and poke fun at other performers and colleagues of yours, and sometimes they were Gerard.
Oh, when I went to see the Ragtime spoof, I was nervous. When it came up, it started, I was sitting there completely petrified, like that it was going to be, you know, how horrifying it was going to be for me. I was just sat there, and it was hysterical.
What did they do? What number
fantastic.
did they do?
They did sort of the whole thing, and it was actually through Mother's eyes, and it was really, really funny. Like Tata's little girl was a loaf of bread, and I mean, it was like,
Now, when those, remember your loaf of rye.
It was very, very funny.
That changed so much every night. Every night it changed until we opened. Things were cut. It was crazy.
That was very fun.
Really funny.
But it was nerve-wracking to watch. When it was done, I was like, okay.
Well, there's a lot more that we have to explore, but we have to take a break at this point. And so you can all take a deep breath, you can all have a glass of water, you can stand up and sit down, but you have to be back in your seats in like a minute. So right now, this is a break for the American Theatre Wing seminars and working in the theater.
This is CUNY TV, the City University of New York.
Welcome back to the American Theatre Wing seminar on working in the theater. Before we return to our gifted panelists, I would like to point out to you that the Wing is more than a sponsor of seminars and more than our famous Tony Award given for excellence in the theater. We are an organization whose year-round programs are dedicated to serving the theater and the community with the goal of developing new audiences. To achieve that goal, we have created audience development programs for students like Introduction to Broadway, which began 7 years ago and has enabled almost 80,000 New York City high school students to attend a Broadway show. For many of them, their very first time. And through our Theater in School program, theater professionals like these on our seminar panels go directly into classrooms to work with and talk to students about working in the theater. In addition, we have our hospital program, which dates back to World War II and our legendary stage door canteen. Today's version of the program brings talent from Broadway, off-Broadway, and the cabaret world to entertain patients, hospitals, senior nursing centers, and service organizations, children's hospitals in the New York area as well, bringing the magic of the theater to those who cannot get to the theater themselves. We are proud of the work we do and delighted with the wonderful working relationship that we have with the theatrical community, and grateful to our members and everyone who makes what the Wing does possible. We are so grateful to all of you on this panel and indeed grateful to the supporters of the American Theatre Wing. So now let's get back to what it is to work in the theater as a performer. Right now, Ted, would you start this?
Indeed. Thank you, Isabelle. We've heard some, I think, wonderful things about what it's like to be an actor and what that world is about. I wanted to ask a little bit of, some stories. And the first one I want to ask, for those of you who have seen Contact, it's a wonderful story about a woman in a yellow dress and a man who, yes, there's the poster. But I heard a wonderful story about the opening night party, and I wanted you to tell the story of you and John Weidman at the opening night party.
Well, obviously this is a show about swing dancing, and I warned John Weidman weeks and weeks before opening party that he better be brushing up on his swing dancing steps, because we were going to drag him out on the floor. And John Weidman is perhaps the most dance-phobic person I've ever met in my entire life, even more so than Boyd, perhaps. He was petrified, but sure enough, the very last song, they were playing The Party's Over, and John Weidman and I got out and danced the night away on the dance floor. He even dipped me at the end.
That's amazing. I didn't know that.
I have pictures to prove it. Maybe his first and last.
Yeah.
Boyd, do you have a story, or?
No.
None that he can tell.
Well, actually, it did make me think of the opening night. One of the dancers' boyfriend's mother, backstage, opening night, and so it's very celebratory. It would have been a wonderful evening, and we were all exhausted and exhilarated, as you tend to be on opening nights, so the boyfriend's mother came back into the dressing room, and she looked at me and she said, "You have the most pathetic face."
Thank you.
So I said, the only thing you could say in those situations is, "Thank you." So I'm going to take that as a compliment. She said, "Oh, I meant it so." And then I saw her afterwards at the party, and she said, "Well, your hair certainly looks better now."
She's not your mother?
People will say anything.
No, it's like they do. And they're like.
They say anything to you.
Oh, yeah.
It's
That's
amazing.
so funny.
Yeah. I was working at the Guthrie Theater, and it was opening night of Our Town. I was playing George. One of the supporters of the theater are the Pillsburys, in Minnesota. So George Pillsbury and his wife Sally, who I'd met now 9 times at all these functions for the Guthrie. Alan Schneider, late Alan Schneider, had directed, and I saw him at the party, and he goes, Boyd, come here. And so he goes, "I want you to meet George and Sally Pillsbury." He was trying to get away, I could tell. so he's going to, and I went, "Oh yes, hi." And they go, "Oh well, it's very nice to meet you." And I go, "Okay, they don't remember me, but that's okay." And I just played George in the show, and they said, "So what do you do here?" And I went, "Well, I'm an actor." And they said, "Oh, were you in the show tonight?" And I went, yeah, I was. And they said, "So who did you play?" And I went, pointing to George, I said, "I played George." And they go,
Oh no, they couldn't.
"I guess I missed that." And I said, "The one that married Emily?" And they went, So I said, "Oh." And they said, "Well, are you in anything else?" And we were in rep. And so I said, "Well, I'm in The Tempest." And they go, "Oh, well, we saw that." And I said, "So who did you play in that?" I said, "I played Ferdinand." And so he went,
This is a nightmare.
Who needs critics?
Yeah, and so I know.
No,
And
you
they
don't.
said, and what does he do? I said, "He's the one who marries Miranda." and they go, No, I know, and that's what I was thinking. And and she goes, so Sally goes, oh, no, don't you remember? He was the one who was dressed, had this beautiful white costume, and he said, "Oh yes, remember he was the one in the white costume." He goes, "Oh yeah. Well, you must have been a lot better in that than you were in this tonight."
Well, apparently so.
I hate popping fresh dough.
Nightmare.
Well, it was very nice to meet you again.
Hysterical.
Now, Brian, you were in the Minskoff with the show that had some divas, Sunset Boulevard.
Oh.
Well, there's a story. There must be some story. Not my word.
No, everyone I did with. I never got to go in with Glenn. Glenn was a hoot. Glenn would play tricks on everybody, and my favorite story about Glenn is one night before, it was April Fool's Day, and I went up to Glenn where everybody met before the curtain went up. I don't know why, we all just kind of hung out and said hi for the opening number before she had to go up on the house and come down. I said, Glenn, why don't we tell them to make an announcement that you're out, George Hearn is out, everybody's out, and then the whole cast will say over the mic, April Fools. And she's such a prankster, she loved it. So of course, when Glenn went to the PSM and said, I want to do this announcement. So they announced to the whole audience that at this performance, the role of so-and-so, usually performed by, and went through the entire list of all the principals. And you could just hear them. And you know, Norma, usually played by Glenn Close. The whole audience, oh, God! And then the whole cast screamed, April Fools! It was the funniest thing. The entire audience screamed, howling laughter, applauded, went crazy, and it was just a great
idea.
That's a great idea.
I'm surprised some of them weren't already out the door.
I know.
Really?
Then my first time on as Joe Gillis was opposite Betty, and I was on vacation, and they had to call me to come back. And I was sick. It was a night. I was a mess. And she showed up to the rehearsal. They had made changes because it was the last time Glenn left, and I went on vacation. It was a week, and then I had to come back. They had made changes in the show for Betty, as well they should. And I had not been there for any of the rehearsals. And so we had a little rehearsal. Betty showed up to the rehearsal with a huge bouquet of flowers to give me, and just said, "You're going to be great. Don't you worry about a thing." And it went great. Except in the performance, it was my first time on, and one of my lines I said, the line is, "You shouldn't let another writer read your stuff. He may try to steal it." And I said, shouldn't let another writer read your stuff. He may try to steal it." And she went, "Abda, I'm not afraid."
Perfect.
And we just looked, and she get like smiled, and from then on it was like clear sailing. It was fine. And then at the end, we never got to talk throughout the show until the end of Act One, where I come back. She's tried to commit suicide. I'm on top of her, kissing her, and then the curtain came. We both started laughing hysterically, and she's like, "I had to, honey. I just had to." I was like, "Thank you," because I would have like killed myself for the rest of the night. But you know, she was just great. So those are my two divas. They're not evil diva stories. They were both great. So yeah.
Well, that's great. Yeah. Kristen, do you have any stories, embarrassing moments on stage or anything?
Well, I was also at the Guthrie, and I was doing Babes in Arms, and I had several wig changes. And I could tell that this intern, really sweet girl, she just wasn't getting the wig on.
Oh dear.
I could feel it sometimes when I would shake my head that it was sort of sliding. But one particular night, there's a scene where I'm yelling at my co-star, and there's another man laying at my feet, and I'm like, I'm just going to go and be with him. He's laying there at my feet, and I said, I'm just going to go and be with him. And the wig flew off, and it was laying on his back. And I looked up, and I'm in my wig cap, the microphone's right here, and my co-star's eyes were this big. And he's like, and I said, "You've got me so mad, I've lost my hair." He took the wig and left. But what's sad about that is 3 weeks later, I'm in the VOM. 3 weeks later, I'm in the VOM waiting to make an entrance. You know those VOMs?
Oh, yes.
Wig that you come up, and I hear an audience member go, and then her wig fell off, and she grabbed her wig and said, "I've lost my hair," and she ran off. And I heard snickering when I made my entrance. And I was like, that was 3 weeks ago.
Back to see. They wanted it every night.
Yes.
There's a wonderful group of young students here that would like to ask some questions of you, and I think that we're going to start with them right now because I think it's important. They're theater students, and you are people of the theater, so let's hear from them.
This question's for everyone. At what point in your life did you realize that theater was the career you wanted to pursue?
Well, for me, it wasn't actually until I gave it up. I went to college. I was always in the honors classes and the accelerated programs, and my family was very much encouraging me to go into a more traditional type career, medicine, law, corporate America. You know, those were the things that to them would signify success. And I danced since I was a little girl, but I never really thought that it was something I was going to do for a living. I thought it was just something I loved that I got to do on the side. And I spent my junior year abroad in England and quit dancing for the year. I thought, okay, that's it. You know, in college, I'm going overseas, it's time to see the world, and I did, had a fabulous year, but also realized that it was something more than a hobby for me, that although my family had expectations for me that if I was really going to be true to myself, that I had to admit that this was something more important than just an after-school activity. So I finished my degree. I got a degree in communications, and I packed up my car and moved to Chicago and said, I'm going to go be a dancer. And my family, after they all picked themselves up from the floor, have slowly warmed up to the idea. I think when I became a rockette, that was sort of the turning point for them. And now they're all taking credit for driving me to dance classes. Now, you know, my uncle, my military uncle, saying, "Oh, I was the one who told her she should be a performer." But the thing is I don't know if I really knew it's what I wanted to do until I stopped doing it. I wasn't one of those people who knew from the time I was 3. I knew it was something I always loved, but I grew up in a very small town in East Texas. It seemed like there's nobody in my family in show business. There's nobody in my town, really, from show business, and so there weren't any people to follow. There weren't any role models immediately around me. And so it took me a while to sort of realize it was a possibility. And it wasn't until I sort of gave it up and I realized I can't do without this. Who knows what's going to happen. Maybe I'll make a fool of myself. Maybe I'll fall flat on my face. But it's also a career that you can't wait to do until you're 80 or 90. I mean, I can go be a lawyer or go to med school or I can do that at any point in my career, but I can't always dance and act and sing and do these things. It's something you really have to do while you have the freedom and the youth to do it. And so I just sort of took a deep breath and jumped. Thank God. You know?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next question.
This question is especially for Kristin and Bryan. Was it difficult to deal with being singled out as the positive aspect of a show in reviews that weren't generally raves?
Go ahead.
Oh, gosh. Well, you have to, as an actor, you really, honestly, you don't really live for the reviews. You don't. It's one person's opinion. Unfortunately, millions read it, you know, in the New York Times. It is difficult because what they don't take into consideration is the months of work that everyone puts into it and all the talent and the blood, sweat, and tears that go into it. Also, in our case, one thing that all the critics failed to note, and is the basic truth of the piece, is that despite what they say, the audiences jump to their feet and at the end of the show and dance, and I think the audience doesn't lie. You know, they let you know. So it is hard because they are my friends, and it hurts me that they were not mentioned in a positive way. But not all of them were bad. But it's bittersweet.
Basically the same thing.
Ditto.
And also, I've been lucky, and a lot of the cast that I've been in were very, very friendly and very close, and they're just love and supportive, you know, and they're happy, and people are still coming to the show, so that's the ultimate.
I remember Brooks Atkinson once said, "The audience was beside itself with pleasure," and I thought, boy, there's no critic today who says stuff like that.
Well, that's true.
It's an acknowledgement of what you're saying.
That's true.
Next question.
This question is for the entire panel. I wanted to know what each of you find to be the most rewarding and the most difficult aspect of working in theater.
Cosmic question.
Difficult auditioning for me. I don't know about you.
Or the unpredictability, the insecurity of not knowing what the next job is going to be. I mean, hopefully you go from project to project, but it doesn't always work that way. Sometimes you go for long stretches of time with no work, and you don't know what your income is going to be. And that's probably, for me, the most difficult part, because you can't predict what your future is going to be like. You don't have the 9-to-5 job, you know.
Right. The best part is being able to work in what you love. That's the most rewarding, for me at least.
Well, yeah, the thing, you know, in our show, I get to kick off the show with no business like show business. And to stand out there every night and feel the curtain go up behind me and feel the spotlight on me and completely quiet, I started a cappella. And it's the most amazing feeling, night after night after night. And to go out there and do that show with Bernadette and our cast, we're blessed.
Yeah.
We have, it's a really wonderful thing to be able to be in a good show.
Yeah.
I also love showing up to the stage door.
Yeah.
Walking in the stage door, knowing, not afterwards when everyone's there and everything, but just going in, signing in.
Saying hello to people.
Saying
Kind
hello.
of joining your family.
Yeah,
Evening.
it's a great
Wonderful.
feeling.
Yes.
It's true.
Hi.
Some families are better than others.
Exactly. They're all
My
different.
question is for all the panelists. I was wondering, how did you feel about your future in the theater when you were our age, 18, 19 years old?
I look back on that time and think how great it was to have naivete. And I wish sometimes I still had that.
Yeah.
Because because I was fearless. Basically, I thought that I was going to be successful. I mean, I knew it was going to be hard because everybody tells you that and all of that sort of thing. But I came here, started auditioning like the day after I got here, got a job, relatively quickly. No, I think one of the things is when you begin to work and you become more known in the business, the expectations are higher and higher and higher every time you walk into the door. So that becomes, for me, more nerve-wracking than when nobody knew who I was and it didn't really matter and I could try or do anything I wanted to. Now it's more of now you feel like there's more at stake because you feel like you have to continue to prove.
Actually, Marin and I worked together
Yeah.
when she was
When
quite
I was
young.
really young.
And my agent saw her there, Michael Bloom.
This was in Michigan.
And you came to town. You had things kind of in hand.
Yeah, I
when
had.
you
I
came
mean, I
to
had an
town.
agent.
You
I
had
was
an
lucky.
agent.
I was lucky. I had my
Yeah.
car. I had an agent. So, and I had a good background of working at this
We have
theater where
a theater. There's a summer stock theater in Michigan, southern Michigan, called the Barn. And it really kind of gives you a flavor of what it's like. It's a 500-seat theater. They do 8 shows a week or 7 shows a week, depending on how much of a
2-week
hit
stock.
it is. And it's tough work, but it's total immersion.
And we both apprenticed there at different
Right.
times and both sort of started there.
How did you know where to go for an audition? How did you know how to if you first came to New York?
Well, because I had met people, I mean, like Tom, and there were people that that would come back that had worked there, that were professionals that had lived here and had worked on Broadway, and so knew, go to get backstage, so that helped. We helped each other know what to do when we got here. So.
And the process still continues.
Right.
I mean, there's people coming from the Barn every year that come to New York.
That still come and get help.
It's one of the few theaters that really does that kind of thing anymore. Has an
Yeah.
apprentice program and resident stock theater.
Does that answer?
My question is directed to the whole panel. I was wondering where you think the future of modern theater might be going. Do you believe it might become more commercialized or less commercialized?
You got Disney, you got, who's next? Warner Brothers is going to start producing shows. It's becoming more and more corporate. The future of like producing couples like Fran and Barry Weissler, they're dinosaurs. It's not going to be around for very much longer. It's changing, but at the same time, I mean, there's a lot of shows going up. There's a lot of work for actors. Some people would bemoan some of the change to corporate structure, but they have the money to do a lot of things.
Yes, and when you live in a country that doesn't subsidize the arts like most, say, European nations, we really don't. I don't know that there's any other choice. I don't think that the sort of the
Thank God for Lincoln Center.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly
Like
right.
Lincoln
The
Center.
not-for-profit theaters really are as close to a kind of subsidized theater that we have. I guess I would say if I had any hope for the theater in the future, is that that a balance is either maintained or created that keeps there's always room for the commercial theater. And I think there will be. And I think the corporate money that's coming in is ultimately a good thing because it means that shows will happen.
Right.
And that I mean, I've heard some criticism of like the Disney shows like Beauty and the Beast and Lion King saying, oh, it's just big commercial products. But it puts young people in the audiences. They see theater.
And they're great.
And they're great. They're wonderful
Yeah.
shows, and I think that's great. What we sort of don't have now is audiences your age and my age really regularly going to the theater. That's we have an elderly audience and we have a very young audience, and so the big question in a certain way is that as people our age and you know, what's going to happen to the years when that's the dominant audience?
Yes.
Will they be in the theater?
I do find it, and I do want to believe that it's going to be great and continue, because when I moved up, originally it was one of those years where there was nothing practically on Broadway. But unfortunately, I do believe that it's becoming very cost prohibitive for a family to go to the theater.
Particularly Broadway. I mean, the
Broadway.
price is at $100. I mean, that's a $500 evening, to, you know, for a babysitter, and
it becomes
a small meal.
I remember
Exactly.
I remember when I first moved up, I had to see Nicholas Nickleby. It was the second time it was done.
Right.
And the tickets were $100. But, granted, it was 8 hours of brilliant theater. But the money I had allotted when I first moved up for transportation for maybe a month and a half, I used for that, and I walked everywhere just so I could go see it. And then I found out, like right before I went to go see the show, the free tickets were up at Equity. Bitter.
This is a question for Miss Mazzie. I was just wondering what kind of research went into your portrayal of Mother in Ragtime?
Well, the wonderful thing about Ragtime was that we had an incredible novel in which the show is based that Edgar Doctorow wrote. And so I had great source material there because she's beautifully written. But I think I did a lot of research just on women of the time, the Victorian women of the period. And I also just like to create the human being as far as, so I made up her family, her name, where she came from, who her relatives were, what, you know, because her name was Mother, so of course gave her, everyone had a name, all of that sort of, which, and sort of, I wrote journals, I did this for Passion too, I wrote out things that were her life. I like to do that, so that they really are human beings. But a lot of it, like I said, a lot of the guidelines were in the novel for me, for Ragtime. So I had boundaries, and I had things that I needed to keep within the guidelines of the show. But it was a wonderful. It's very fun to create. And I mean, I'm actually doing it with Lily now too. I mean, I've given her a whole life, even though someone else has played her before. Gone at her as if no one's ever. You know, I'm the first person that's ever, or whatever. I'm originating it for myself and giving her a life, and it's very fun to do.
We have one more question.
This question's for the whole panel. I was wondering, where are you from? What's your background, and where did you train, if any, and what style did you train in of acting?
Who hasn't answered this? Because we've touched on it.
I went to the University of Wisconsin, studied voice, applied voice. I was going to be an opera singer, I thought. Until I sang for a general manager of an opera company. And he said, well, you got a nice little voice. 3 or 4 more years of study, you'll be able to do, you know, 3rd or 4th leads in operas and make 20 grand a year. I said, nah, I'm going to New York.
I started acting in California at a little place called the Pacific Conservatory of the Performing Arts. And then from there I went to auditioned several times, got turned down, was an alternate once, and then finally got accepted to Juilliard. So I went to Juilliard for 4 years, and was the emphasis there is classical theater, of which I still get to do occasionally, but I sort of had a sort of jack of all trades career, done a lot of different things.
School of Hard Knocks.
One more, quick.
Question?
One more question?
No?
Oh, yeah, I thought you had another question.
I don't think we have time for
okay.
another question. I have one that I'd like to go around very quickly. but it has to be very quickly. How did you get your first agent?
They saw me at Paper Mill Playhouse, and I got a meeting.
How do you get an agent?
I worked at a theater here in the city that's no longer, and I wish we could have it back, called Equity Library
Yeah,
Theater,
guilty.
because it was a great showcase for new people who have just moved up to New York, and that's how I got my first agent. I was in a show.
I happened just to actually go to a birthday party, and I had just been cast. There happened to be the casting director who had just cast me in Dream, and the agent was there also, and the casting director recommended me to the agent, and he called me, and we set up a meeting.
Thank you so much. I'm going to have these questions answered afterwards. But right now, I have to say this is the American Theatre Wing Seminar on Working in the Theatre, coming to you from the Graduate Center at the City University of New York. And this seminar has been on the performance, and it has been extremely good, wonderfully interesting, and marvelously talented people. Thank you very, very much for sharing.